The cameras blinked red on the wall of the big white mansion in Lekki. Inside the living room, a giant TV showed the live feed from the gate. On the screen, a small, tired woman in a worn brown Ankara gown walked toward the intercom. Her hair was rough. Her slippers were almost broken. She held the gate bars and tried to look inside, like she was searching for a face she knew by heart. Johnson Uche stood up from the sofa when he saw her. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened. He pressed the talk button and spoke to the guards. "Don't let her in. Kick her out. Lock the gate." "Yes, sir," the guards said at once. The woman, Madam Sarah, didn't know he was watching. She held the gate and called softly, "My son. Johnson, please, talk to me." Two muscular guards in black uniforms and dark glasses marched over. Their faces were hard. They didn't ask questions. They grabbed her by the arms and lifted her feet off the ground. "Please, please, I am his mother," she cried, tears running down her cheeks. "Tell him his mother is here." Inside, Johnson's hands shook, but not from fear, from anger, from something he chose to believe. He pressed another button. The gate swung open. He stepped out in a green kaftan and a red cap, his face burning with pride and hurt. "You witch," he shouted, pointing at her. "You think I don't know? You have been draining my success to gain power in your evil ways. I told them to carry you out. You are not my mother." The guards froze. Madam Sarah stopped struggling. Her eyes, wet with pain, found her son's face. The same face she had loved since the day she held him as a baby. "Johnson," she whispered. "My child." "I said leave." Johnson slammed the gate. The iron bars shuddered. The lock clicked loud, like a final word. Madam Sarah's feet touched the road. She did not fight. She did not curse. She sat on the curb outside the gate, tears falling fast. She looked up at the sky and said, in a shaking voice, "God, you see everything. Judge between us." Then she stood, wiped her face with the edge of her old gown, and began the long walk back to the bus stop. The guards watched her go. The camera kept blinking. Inside the mansion, the TV screen turned to black. Before this moment, there was another life. Johnson Uche had once been a lanky boy with bright eyes, only 17, on the day his father, Uche Andrew, died. His father was a middle-class civil servant. He worked hard, wore simple shirts, and kept a soft smile for his family. But his heart grew weak after long years of stress. The medicine was too expensive. The hospital bills rose like a flood. One night, with rain hitting the roof, he closed his eyes and did not open them again. At the small funeral, Johnson stood next to his mother and tried to be strong. His hands shook when he touched the simple wooden coffin. He wanted to scream, but he stayed quiet because his mother needed him to be brave. Madam Sarah was a vegetable seller in the market. She woke up before sunrise to arrange baskets of tomatoes, peppers, and greens. She tied her headscarf tight and smiled at customers even when her feet hurt. She counted coins late at night under a tiny bulb, waiting for her son to come home from reading lessons. "Eat, my child," she would say, placing down a small plate. "You must read. You must rise." She saved money little by little. When Johnson got into university to study accountancy, she danced in the small kitchen and cried with joy. She kept working, kept saving, kept believing. She fixed torn clothes. She mended old shoes. She said no to new wrappers so she could say yes to her son's school fees. Years passed. Johnson studied hard and became the best student in his class. On graduation day, he stood on the stage with a medal around his neck. The hall clapped for him. Cameras flashed. He held his degree with both hands and looked into the crowd until he found her. His mother in her simple Ankara, hands covering her mouth, eyes full of happy tears. "Mom," he said after the ceremony, "we did it." "No," she smiled, shaking her head. "You did it, my child. God did it." Johnson got a job at the central bank. He wore neat suits and learned fast. He grew confident. He spoke in meetings. He took notes late into the night. After a few years, he resigned and started Johnson Group of Companies. He was young, brave, and bright. The world seemed to open its doors. At first, he remembered where he came from. He bought his mother a small, clean house. He filled her kitchen with food. He sent money every month. He visited on Sundays, bringing fruits and laughter. He hugged her and said, "I will make you proud, Mom." And she would touch his cheek and say, "You already have, Johnson." Then came the storms. A big contract failed. Then another. A truck accident ruined a shipment. A partner betrayed him. A new law broke his plans. Loans pressed on his back like heavy stones. Staff whispered. Reporters asked hard questions. He did everything he knew, but the line on the chart kept falling. Fear grew like a shadow and followed him everywhere. One evening, when he was most afraid, a man walked into his office. He wore a long white robe and carried a string of wooden beads. He called himself Prophet Fire. He said he had seen a vision. He said someone close was eating Johnson's blessings. "Who?" Johnson asked, tired and desperate. The man's eyes went cold. "Your mother," Johnson flinched. "No, never." The man leaned closer. "Her power is old. She drains you to rise again. Cut her off, or lose everything." The words landed like stones on Johnson's heart. He wanted to throw them away, but he couldn't. He went home with the words bouncing in his head. That night, he could not sleep. The next morning, he didn't call his mother. The day after that, he blocked her number. He told his guards to never let her in without his permission. He told himself this was wisdom. He told himself this was protection. He told himself this was strength. But the house grew quiet. The rooms felt colder. His heart felt heavier. The day Madame Sarah came to the gate was hot and bright. The tar road outside the mansion shone like glass. She had taken a bus from the outskirts of town, holding the last small money she had. She stood for a long time at the bus stop, staring at the mansion in the distance. She prayed as she walked. "Let me see my child. Let me hold his hand. Let me remind him of who he is." We know how the gate answered her. We saw the guards lift her up. We heard Johnson's sharp words. We watched the heavy door slam shut. She took 2 buses to return to her small room on the edge of the city. The room felt smaller that night. The mattress on the floor felt thinner. The fan clicked, and then stopped because the power went out. She lay on her back in the darkness, hands on her chest, and tried not to cry again. "I gave him everything I had," she whispered to the ceiling. "I forgive him, Lord. But please, please, remember me." The power came back with a hum. The fan turned slowly. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. The city, big and loud, did not know her name. But heaven did. Her phone lit up. It was from unknown number. She sat up fast. For a second, she hoped it was her son. Then she pushed the thought away and picked the call. "Hello?" Her voice was soft. A calm male voice replied, "Good evening, Ma. Please, am I speaking with Madame Sarah, widow of Mr. Uche Andrew?" She froze. "Yes." "Who is this?" "My name is Barrister Jude Anderson," the voice said. "I work for an oil company your late husband invested in many years ago. We have been searching for you." She gripped the phone with both hands. "Searching? For me?" "Yes, Ma," he said. "There is a matter about your husband's shares. They have grown. The will has your name. We need you to come to our office tomorrow morning." Madame Sarah's heart pounded in her chest like a drum. She looked around her dark room. She looked at the tiny window. She looked at the fan and the little table and the old bag by the door. Was she dreaming? She swallowed. "Sir, how much are we talking about?" There was a short pause on the line. Then the lawyer answered, slow and clear. $5 million, Ma." The phone almost slipped from her hand. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. And then her door handle moved. Someone was outside, turning it gently, as if trying to come in. The call was still on. The night was very quiet. Madame Sarah held her breath. The handle turned again. Madame Sarah's heart raced so hard she could hear it in her ears. The door handle moved again, slow and deliberate, as if whoever was outside wanted her to know they were there. She pressed the phone against her cheek and whispered, "Sir, someone is at my door." Barrister Jude's voice sharpened. "Do you have neighbors close by?" "Yes, but they are sleeping," she murmured. "Stay on the line with me. Don't open it," he instructed. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the switch beside her mattress. The dim yellow bulb lit up the tiny room, throwing long shadows on the walls. She could see the handle twitch, then stop. Silence followed. but it was the kind of silence that made her feel watched. "Ma," Barrister Jude said, "lock your windows and sit away from the door. I will call you again tomorrow morning to give you the company address. But for tonight, please stay safe." When the call ended, Madame Sarah moved quickly, shutting the small wooden windows and pushing the rickety table against the door. She sat on the mattress with her knees pulled to her chest, whispering prayers under her breath. Minutes passed, then hours. Eventually, the sound of footsteps faded into the night. By morning, her body ached from sitting in the same position. But her mind was wide awake. The moment the sun pushed through the thin curtain, she washed her face, changed into her cleanest ankara, and tied her headscarf neatly. Today, she would know if last night's phone call had been a dream or a miracle. The oil company's office was nothing like the buildings she knew. The tall glass doors reflected the morning light, and uniformed receptionists greeted her with polite smiles. "Good morning, Ma," one said. "Please, this way." They led her to a large boardroom where a man in a grey suit stood waiting. He was tall, with kind eyes and a voice that carried quiet authority. "Madam Sarah," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Barrister Jude Anderson. I'm so glad you came." She shook his hand, her voice soft. "Good morning, sir. I didn't sleep all night thinking about what you told me." He smiled gently. "It's all true. Your late husband invested in our company 20 years ago. The shares have grown over time, and according to his will, the money now belongs to you. $5 million, Ma. And it's ready for claim." Madame Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She thought of her market stall, the long days in the sun, the nights counting coins. She thought of all the times she went without food so her son could have enough. Her lips trembled. "Sir, I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Barrister Jude replied. "You only need to sign these documents and provide identification. Once that's done, we will transfer the funds to a bank account in your name." It took almost 2 hours to complete the paperwork, but when she stepped out of the building, she felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off her shoulders. She no longer walked. She floated. Back at her small room that evening, she sat at the edge of the mattress, staring at her old phone. Her mind went to Johnson, her son, the boy she had carried on her back to school when he was too tired to walk. The young man she had celebrated when he got his first job, the man who now called her a witch at his gate. Her hands clenched. "He threw me away, but I am still his mother." She thought of his failing company. She had read the headlines in the newspaper sellers' stands. Johnson Group faces collapse. She had overheard people in the bus saying he was selling properties to pay debts. For a moment, she considered ignoring it all. Let him taste the dust, she thought. But her heart ached at the memory of his face as a little boy, looking up at her with trust. "God," she whispered, "guide me. Show me what to do." That night, she called Barrister Jude again. "Sir," she said, "I want to invest some of this money. But I need it done quietly. Nobody, especially my son, should know I am the one." "What kind of investment?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "I want to buy something. Something important. And I want to do it in another name." There was a pause on the line. Then the lawyer said, "Tell me exactly what you have in mind, Ma." The plan moved faster than she expected. Within a few weeks, through her lawyer, Madame Sarah quietly purchased Johnson Group of companies for $2 million, the price set after the business was declared bankrupt. The papers were signed, the ownership transferred. And yet, Johnson had no idea the new buyer was the very woman he had chased away from his gate. She didn't stop there. Every time one of his properties went on sale, the mansions, the cars, her lawyer bought them under different registered companies. Piece by piece, she gathered all that had once belonged to him. It wasn't revenge that drove her. It was something deeper, a desire to protect what she had helped him build, even if he didn't understand it yet. But word was spreading in the business world. People whispered about the mysterious investor buying all of Johnson's assets. Johnson himself was desperate to know who it was. And then one morning, after losing his last mansion in Lekki, Johnson stepped out of a taxi in front of his mother's modest home in the outskirts of town. He was thinner, his eyes sunken, his pride swallowed. But instead of the little bungalow he expected, there was a brand new, shining white mansion standing tall where her house used to be. His heart skipped. He froze on the street. Before he could turn away, the front door opened, and there, in the doorway, stood Madame Sarah, wearing an expensive lace gown, gold earrings glinting in the sun. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were deep pools of emotion. "Johnson," she said softly, "you're in the right place." For a long moment, Johnson could not move. His breath came in slow, uneven waves as he stood frozen on the paved walkway, staring at the gleaming mansion. The sunlight bounced off the white walls, blinding him for a second. His mind told him it couldn't be real. His mother's old bungalow was supposed to be here, not this palace. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words felt stuck in his throat. Madame Sarah stepped out onto the veranda, her gold earrings catching the morning light. She looked nothing like the worn woman he had ordered his guards to throw out weeks ago. Her headscarf was neatly tied, and her gown flowed around her like royalty. But her eyes, they still held the same softness, the same depth that had once been his safe place. "Johnson," she said again, her voice calm but steady. "You're in the right place." He swallowed hard. "Mom," his voice cracked. "How? When? I don't understand." Her eyes searched his face, and for a brief second she saw the boy he once was, the boy who would run home from school shouting her name. But that image was quickly replaced by the man who had looked her in the eye and called her a witch. "Come inside," she said finally, stepping back into the house. "We have things to talk about." Johnson hesitated. Shame pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. But his legs moved anyway, carrying him up the steps and into the cool, scented air of the mansion. Inside, the living room was a world he never imagined in this neighborhood. Polished marble floors, expensive leather sofas, crystal lights above. Every corner looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Johnson turned slowly, still trying to make sense of it. "Mum, where did all this come from?" She sat down gracefully, her back straight. "Sit, Johnson. Let me tell you a story." He lowered himself into a chair, his eyes never leaving her face. She began. "The night you sent me away from your gate, I went home to my small room and prayed. I thought that was the end for me, but God saw me. That same night, a lawyer called. Your father, before he died, had invested in an oil company. The shares had grown into $5 million, and the will had my name on it." Johnson blinked, shocked. "$5 million?" She nodded. "I claimed it the next morning, and while you were losing everything, I used that money to buy back what was yours. Your company, your houses, your cars. I bought them all, but not in my name." He leaned forward, confusion and disbelief battling in his eyes. "Why? Why would you do that after what I did to you?" Her lips trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Because you are my son. I raised you from nothing, Johnson. I watched you rise, and I couldn't let you be destroyed completely, even if you believed lies about me." Johnson's throat burned. His mind flashed to the fake pastor, the poison in his words, the way fear had twisted his thoughts. He covered his face with his hands. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was blind. That man, he told me you were the reason for my failure. I believed him. I cut you off. His voice broke. "I betrayed you." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I know. But I also know fear can make people do foolish things. That is why I forgave you long before you came here today." Johnson's shoulders shook as he dropped to his knees in front of her. "Please, forgive me again, face to face. I need to hear you say it." She reached out, her hand resting gently on his head, the same way she had comforted him when he was a child. "Johnson, I forgive you, and I'm giving you back everything. Not because you deserve it, but because I believe everyone deserves a second chance." He looked up at her, tears streaking his face. "I swear, Mom, I will never let you down again." That evening, the two of them walked through the mansion together. She showed him the documents proving ownership of the Johnson Group, the keys to his former houses, and the papers for the cars. Everything was in her safe, waiting for him. "Why didn't you just tell me you had this money from the start?" he asked quietly, as they stood in the spacious kitchen. She gave a small smile. "Sometimes the lesson is more important than the comfort. You needed to understand what it means to lose everything before you could truly value it." Johnson nodded slowly. "And I have, Mum. I promise you I won't waste this second chance." Over the next few weeks, Johnson began to rebuild his company with his mother's guidance. The news of his return spread quickly. Investors who had once abandoned him now came back, curious about his sudden comeback. But whenever they asked where the funding came from, he simply said, "From a source I will never take for granted again." Madame Sarah stayed in the background, letting him take the lead, but Johnson never made a decision without consulting her. Slowly, the trust between them began to heal. One evening, as they sat in the garden watching the sunset, Johnson turned to her. "Mom, I think I'm ready for something else." "Someone else, actually." She smiled, knowingly. "There's a woman, isn't there?" His lips curved into a small grin. "Her name is Amaka. I've known her for a while, but I never really saw her until now. She's kind, smart, and she doesn't care about the money. I think she might be the one." Madame Sarah's eyes softened. "If she's the one, then she will love you for who you are, not for what you have." Johnson nodded. "I want you to meet her soon." But before that meeting could happen, a familiar figure reappeared in his life, one he thought he had erased completely. It was Prophet Fire, and he wasn't coming with an apology. The knock at Johnson's office door was soft but deliberate. His secretary poked her head in. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. He says you know him." Johnson didn't look up from the papers on his desk. "I'm not expecting anyone." The secretary hesitated. He called himself Prophet Fire. Johnson's pen froze mid-signature. Slowly, he looked up. "Send him in," he said, his voice tight. The man walked in wearing the same flowing white robe as before, beads around his neck, a long wooden staff in his hand. His expression was calm, but his eyes flickered with something darker. Well, Prophet Fire said with a smile. "The prodigal son has risen again." Johnson leaned back in his chair. "What do you want?" The prophet walked around the office slowly, touching the furniture, as though inspecting it. "I hear your fortunes have changed. You've risen from the ashes in a way most men cannot. And yet," he turned sharply to face Johnson, "you did it without my guidance." Johnson's jaw tightened. "I didn't rise because of you. In fact, I fell because of you. You poisoned my mind against my own mother." Prophet Fire chuckled, low and mocking. "I told you the truth. You chose to act on it." "You lied," Johnson snapped. "You saw my fear and used it. You made me turn against the only person who ever truly loved me." The prophet's smile faded. "Be careful, Johnson. There are forces at work you don't understand, and if you're not careful, they'll come for you again." "I'll take my chances," Johnson said coldly. "Now get out of my office." Prophet Fire's eyes narrowed. He leaned in close enough for Johnson to smell the faint scent of incense on his robe. "You'll regret speaking to me this way," he whispered. "When the tide turns again, remember this moment." Without another word, he turned and left. Johnson sat there for a moment, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Something about the way the prophet had spoken chilled him, not because he feared the man, but because he knew how dangerous lies could be when whispered into the wrong ears. That evening, Johnson drove to his mother's mansion. She was in the sitting room, reading through some property documents. "Mom," he said, walking in. He came back. She looked up. "Who?" "Prophet Fire." "Prophet?" Her expression hardened immediately. "What did he want?" Johnson sank into the sofa opposite her. "I think he wanted to see if I'd fall under his spell again. He hinted at trouble." Madame Sarah closed the file in her lap. "Johnson, that man is not a prophet. He's a predator. Men like him thrive on fear. If he can't control you, he will try to destroy you." Johnson rubbed his forehead. "I just don't want him going after you again." Her voice was firm. "Let him try. I'm not the same woman he met before, and neither are you." Still, Johnson couldn't shake the feeling that the prophet's visit was not the end of things, but the beginning. 2 weeks later, Johnson invited Amaka to dinner at his mother's house. Madame Sarah greeted her warmly, and Amaka's gentle nature quickly won her over. They spent the evening talking, laughing, and sharing stories about Johnson's childhood, much to his embarrassment. At one point, Madame Sarah excused herself to take a phone call. Johnson and Amaka sat alone in the living room. "She's wonderful," Amaka said softly. "You're lucky to have her." Johnson nodded. "I know. I almost lost her once. and I'll never let that happen again. Just then, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, an unknown number. He ignored it. Seconds later, the same number called again. Reluctantly, he answered. "Hello?" A deep voice replied. "Mr. Johnson, this is Inspector Bala from the State Police. We need you to come down to the station. It's urgent." Johnson frowned. "What's this about?" "It's about your mother," the inspector said gravely. Johnson's blood ran cold. "I'll be there immediately." At the station, Inspector Bala met him at the entrance. "Your mother's name came up in a fraud investigation," he said. Johnson's jaw dropped. "That's impossible. My mother doesn't—" The inspector raised a hand. "I'm not saying she's guilty. But someone filed a complaint claiming she used illegal funds to acquire multiple properties in Lagos. The report says the complainant is a concerned citizen." Johnson's stomach twisted. "A concerned citizen? Or a man in white robes?" Inspector Bala frowned. "You know who filed it?" Johnson's voice was like stone. "Yes. And I'm going to make sure he regrets it." When Johnson told his mother, she didn't look surprised. "I told you he would try," she said calmly. "But the truth will clear my name." "But that's not enough," Johnson said. "He's not just trying to ruin you. He's trying to break me through you. I can't let that happen." That night, Johnson sat in his study, going through every connection he had. Business partners, old colleagues, friends in the media. If Prophet Fire wanted a war, Johnson would give him one. But the more he dug, the more he realized this wasn't just about one man. The Prophet had ties to a network of people, politicians, business rivals, and shadowy figures, all of whom could benefit from seeing Johnson fall again. And if he didn't move carefully, they wouldn't just take his company. They'd destroy his mother's name forever. The next morning, as the sun rose, Johnson made a decision. He was going to expose Prophet Fire, not just as a fraud, but as the heart of a much bigger scheme. What he didn't know was that Prophet Fire had already made his next move, and it was aimed directly at Amaka. The call came just after 8 p.m. Johnson was in his study, sorting through documents with evidence against Prophet Fire, when his phone rang. It was Amaka's number. He answered quickly, smiling. "Hey, love." But it wasn't her voice. "Mr. Johnson," a low male voice said, "if you want to see your woman again, you'll do exactly as I say." Johnson's blood went cold. "Who is this? Where is Amaka?" The voice chuckled. "She's safe. For now. But your safety, and your mother's, depends on you bringing me all the documents you've been collecting on Prophet Fire. If you don't, Amaka will disappear, and you will never find her." The line went dead. Johnson gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. He knew exactly who was behind this. In the living room, Madam Sarah was sipping tea when Johnson rushed in. "Mom, they have Amaka." Her cup clattered against the saucer. "What? Who?" "Prophet Fire," Johnson said, pacing. "He wants the evidence I've been gathering against him. If I hand it over, I lose my chance to expose him. If I don't—" His voice caught. Madam Sarah stood and walked to him, her voice firm. "Johnson, listen to me. This is not just about you anymore. It's about the people he's already hurt and the ones he will hurt, if he's not stopped. We can't let him win." "But what if she's in danger now?" Johnson asked, his chest tightening. "Then we outsmart him," she said. The next day, Johnson arranged a meeting. The Prophet's men sent instructions an abandoned warehouse near the docks. Johnson was to come alone, with the documents, at midnight. Madam Sarah didn't like it. "It's too dangerous," she warned. "I'm not going in unprepared," Johnson assured her. "Inspector Bala will have his men nearby, ready to move the moment we confirm Amaka is there." That night, Johnson parked his SUV a few streets away from the warehouse and approached on foot. The place was dimly lit, shadows swallowing the corners. From inside, a voice called, "Come in, Johnson." He stepped into the wide, empty space. There was Prophet Fire, standing in the center, flanked by two large men. In the corner, tied to a chair, was Amaka. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "You've caused me a lot of trouble," Prophet Fire said smoothly. "But it ends tonight." "The documents?" Johnson held up a brown envelope. "Let her go first." The Prophet smiled thinly. "No, you first." Johnson took a step forward. "If you hurt her, you'll regret it." Prophet Fire laughed. Regret is for the weak. But before he could move, the sharp click of guns echoed through the warehouse. Inspector Bala and his men stepped out from the shadows, surrounding the prophet and his guards. "Hands where we can see them," Bala barked. The prophet's men froze, but Prophet Fire's smile never faded. "So, you brought the law into this." Bala's men quickly secured the guards and freed Amaka, who ran straight into Johnson's arms. "I'm okay," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "You're safe now," Johnson said, holding her close. Prophet Fire, now in handcuffs, leaned toward Johnson as he was led away. "You think this ends with me? You're wrong. There are others." Johnson's voice was steady. "Then I'll be ready for them." The next morning, the news was everywhere. Fake prophet, arrested in fraud and kidnapping case. Business journals and newspapers reported that the man had been linked to multiple scams, property thefts, and extortion cases. In her mansion, Madame Sarah read the headlines and smiled faintly. "Justice," she murmured. Johnson walked in with Amaka, who carried a tray of tea. "We couldn't have done it without you, Mom," he said. Madame Sarah shook her head. "You fought your own battle. You chose truth over fear. That's worth more than any company or mansion." Amaka smiled warmly. "You raised a good man, Mama Sarah." The older woman's eyes softened. "I just reminded him of who he was. The rest was always inside him." Weeks later, Johnson's life began to feel normal again. The company was back on its feet, new contracts were signed, and the public's trust returned. But he never forgot the lesson. Power and wealth meant nothing without the right heart to guide them. One sunny Saturday, he stood at the front of a small church, watching Amaka walk down the aisle in a flowing white gown. His eyes blurred as he thought about the road that had brought them here, the betrayal, the loss, the second chances. When Mama Sarah walked them both to the altar, tears slipped down her cheeks. She had prayed for this moment, for her son's heart to heal, for him to find love, and for her family to be whole again. And now, here it was. 2 years later, the sound of a baby's cry filled the mansion. Johnson lifted his newborn son in his arms, his heart swelling. "Welcome to the world, George," he whispered. Mama Sarah stepped forward, her hands trembling as she took the baby from him. She kissed his tiny forehead and closed her eyes, whispering a prayer of gratitude. Her long, quiet battle had been worth it. She looked up at Johnson, her voice steady. "Remember, my son, power can be rebuilt, money can be regained, but the bond between a mother and her child, that must never be broken again." Johnson's eyes glistened. "Never again, Mom." The three of them stood together, framed by the golden light streaming through the window, a picture of loss, redemption, and love that had survived the darkest storms. And though the world outside still held enemies and challenges, inside that home, they knew one truth. Together, they were unshakable. If you enjoyed this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.